The Danny Thomas Hour, usually seen at this time, will not be presented tonight so that we may bring you the following special program.
Word Balloon is brought to you by the League of Word Balloon Listeners. Welcome back, everybody. Time again for Word Balloon, the comic book conversation show. John Suntress here. Always happy to welcome J.H. Williams back to Word Balloon. Always fun to talk to him. Good to see you, man. Thanks for coming back.
Thanks for having me.
Hey, are you kidding? As soon as I saw you put out the word about this Dracula book that you're doing, really exciting. And what inspired you? And first of all, describe it, Jim, because it's not a graphic novel per se.
Right.
Tell me what it is.
So essentially, it's a art book, but I decided to title it as a portfolio because it's it's all focused on one subject, and that led me further to think about. Since it's one subject, is kind of building images that are narrative focused. And therefore I thought, well, instead of treating it just like any other art book or portfolio, to actually write brief passages that tell the narrative. So it's an accompanying story along with the illustrations. And that setup reminded me of old like children's storybooks where you would get an illustration with a little piece of text that goes along with the illustration. But of course, this isn't a children's book, but it's the same idea of that. And the result of it is fascinating to me because I don't think I've really seen a book like this in a really long time. It's quite unique.
That's great. So you're not just putting illustrations next to the Bram Stoker text. You are reinterpreting the Dracula story.
Correct. So yeah, it's not the novel. It's a simplistic. Well, this sounds terrible way to put it, but it's a simplistic way to tell the story through brief passages, one per illustration. And it was kind of fascinating because the way the novel is written, you have different sections of the story from different people's points of view.
Yes.
I couldn't do that for this. So it has to be in a linear fashion, and kind of try to piece that together was fascinating. But the result is cool. I think it's fun. It's different. And hopefully it's one of those things that people enjoy enough that it'll sort of become like an annual favorite for them to pull out every Halloween, and take it in. And then the other thing that made me think about the way the prose parts are written, since it made me think about old storybooks, I also wanted the prose to feel kind of old in the way the sentences are constructed and stuff. So it's a little bit purpley. It's a little bit verse-like in places. Yeah, it's unusual. Hopefully
that's great. Yeah, no, it's intriguing, and truly, I think a lot of us are really looking forward to it. Richard Pace, by the way, joining us on the chat.
Oh, hey, Richard.
And saying he's looking forward to this, which is great to see. Richard, good to see you. Richard's got to come back on Word Balloon. It's been a while since he's been on Word Balloon as well. And even then, I think it was pretty briefly and just in relation when we were tributing Ringo a few years ago with Baltimore and stuff. So, yes, as he says, he describes what you're doing as a poetic synopsis. Excellent. Very cool. Kari Saunders of Splash Pages says this looks great. I love horror and a lot of prose. Yeah, man, it's and perfect timing, Jim, to release it in October right before Halloween. So that
Yeah.
doesn't.
Yeah, it's something that we've been planning to put out for a little bit, and it just was a matter of when Image had committed to putting it out a while ago, and we finally decided, well, let's get it out there.
No, I understand. Is what have you is this the first attempt to write something like this and draw something like this?
In this particular style, yeah, for sure. And the prose style is so kind of peculiar, and that it's one of those things. I think it came out well. I like it, but it's unusual enough in a way where it'd be interesting to see people's response to it. Particularly because in places it definitely has that old purpley, pulpy kind of thing going on, even though the passages are very brief. One illustration, one passage. So it'll be cool to see how people what they think of it. And if it does well, it'd be kind of a cool idea to revisit doing something else like this.
Sure.
Maybe also in the horror genre, if I can find time, because Echolands is killing me on time. So,
do you have other gigs coming up as far as other books and things?
Just Echolands. So I'm working on Echolands Volume 2 right now. So hopefully they'll start coming out next year.
Well, if people want to ask about Echolands, Promethea, Batwoman, cool. You name it, I'm sure Jim would be happy to talk about those things as well. John
sure.
V, another man that says, looks amazing. I like all the books by J.H. Williams. I agree.
Thank
you. Jim, do you ever get when Flesk and Jim Flesk would put out the adaptations of things, guys like Gary Gianni, what he was doing with classics? Yeah,
those are really nice. And it's kind of weird that sort of thing isn't as prevalent as it used to be. Maybe we'll start seeing more of that kind of thing.
I hear you, man. And I'm right now I'm bringing up the preview pages that Image has posted for this so people can see what you're doing. What was it specifically about Dracula where you're like, oh, I got to do this?
I don't know. Maybe because it's, the most famous of the monster stuff. I'd probably would, it's a toss up between that and Frankenstein, right?
I was going to say. Yeah.
I would say Dracula hedges Frankenstein out just by the sheer volume of adaptations that have been done, kind of are proof of that. And that was the other thing. Like, if I was going to tackle this, is how do I present it in a way that isn't like other interpretations? I thought was important. Otherwise, it didn't feel like it would be worth pursuing.
Understood. Richard has a good question here. He's asking, what shaped your Dracula more, movies or the book?
I talked about this a little bit in the introduction that I wrote to the book. I definitely based it on the novel, but I couldn't help but for the other interpretations to creep in. So I talk a little bit about how Dracula in the novel versus, say, film, the film stuff is so romanticized, and in the book he's much more of a monster. I mean, truly a monster, and he's transformative. He's never the same twice, which I found fascinating. But because, even though I had wanted to adhere to the feeling of the book, certain things couldn't help but creep in, such as like some of the vivid color that you would see in Hammer horror films. That sort of stuff would come in. Because it lives in the back of our minds, right? Those interpretations. So that sort of stuff, that classical aspect creeped in even though I was trying to focus more on the narrative that's in the book.
Honestly, I'm not a big modern horror fan, but I
Mm.
really do love the classic Universal stuff and the Hammer stuff very much. And
Hmm.
I always say, beyond Christopher Lee's amazing portrayal, just
Yeah.
like you said, just the atmosphere of
Yeah.
those Hammer films is just so lush. And I would
Yes.
put the Vincent Price, Edgar Allan Poe
Yes.
movies in that same vein of just this beautiful kind of 19th century look and everything, which
And
I think
so
is beautiful.
colorful, right? So
Absolutely. Yes.
even though they're horror tales, they're so colorful. And since I knew these were going to be painted illustrations, I really didn't want to shy away from the color and have it give it too much of a drab or murky feeling. So I tried to pump up the color quite a bit in it. And that probably is what reminds me of the Hammer stuff, but
I understand.
it wasn't intentional. It was sort of, this is just what lived in my head.
No, I get it, man. Absolutely. I'm sorry. I'm still trying to bring up those images of your the preview pages and stuff, and I should have them in a second. Everybody, here I'm going to put up another comment. Sorry, everybody. I'm like doing three things at once, even moving my camera for a moment so I can see what the hell I'm doing. Here, Kari says, and I hear what she's saying. Dracula is sexier, Frankenstein more cerebral. Would you agree?
Maybe for the film stuff, that's the one thing that I found fascinating with the novel of Dracula. It's not sexy. It's it's quite monstrous.
Yeah.
Granted, there's a sense of intimacy involved, particularly when he starts going after Mina and his interactions with Lucy a bit, but it's not as sexy or sex a stand-in for sexual encounters like some of the film stuff can be. It's way more creepy.
I hear you, man. And I don't know why I'm blanking, but I know somebody recently, a couple of years ago, did a fantastic book about Dracula's victims and them going after him.
Interesting.
And again, as you describe him, that it's like, no, he's got that hypnotic power, but that said, this is a very ugly thing that everyone is dealing with. So yeah, I can, and we all love the Lugosi image, and
Of
truly,
course.
I think and of course Christopher Lee as well, and I really think all modern attempts at film are really fighting that image of both Lugosi or Lee. I liked that Netflix show, or no, it was an NBC show, and I forget the name of the actor, but the poor guy had serious substance abuse issues, and he couldn't keep it going. But it was really interesting, and they really also leaned into that late 19th century period of the industrial age and all the different innovations that were happening. And then you've got this, creature of Dracula and stuff. Maybe not John Rhys Davies. That's, of course, from Raiders. God, he was in Match Point, the Woody Allen film, the British-made Woody Allen film. I can't think of the guy's name. Maybe somebody in the chat will remember.
Yeah.
But here we go. Here, more comments from everybody. Oh, and boy, Richard, I'm really glad you're mentioning Frank Langella. He says, another great romantic interpretation. I never saw the play, but I certainly saw the movie, and I always thought he did a great Dracula as well.
Yeah. One of the other things I decided to do, because in the novel, how he's never interpreted in the writings of the different characters the same way twice, I really wanted to have that aspect to him every time he's on the page in the story, is that he's constantly looking different. And that adds kind of a more demonic alien quality to him, that certainly other than human. And so that, and I try to play up on some of that wherever I could.
That's cool. All right, now I've got the pages ready to load here, and I'm going to show everybody, and we'll still be on screen. But here we go. Hang on. Boom. Come on. Is it working? Hold on a minute. There we go. There's the cover again. Sorry, everybody. Hold on. I just want. Okay, good. I just want to make sure my my device wasn't going to like conk out in mid interview. But everything. Let's see here. Are we charging? No, we're not. Hold on a minute. Sorry, everybody. Technical difficulties. You know how it goes. There's the power switch. There it is. It'll work. Yes, there we go. Fantastic. Jesus, scary, folks. All right, so let's hear it. Let's get to the gallery here and look at some of these images. Excellent, man. Look at that. Fantastic, man. That's beautiful. And a really short caption.
Exactly.
So that's kind of interesting. Yeah.
Exactly. That's what I was meaning by brief passages. It's actually kind of an interesting challenge to capture the moment in such a brief passage and have it have the atmosphere and emotional resonance at the same time, while without being here's a slew of words coming at you, you know. So sure. That was an interesting challenge too.
Here we go. I guess Richard says Ed Gorey did the stage design for Dracula on Broadway.
Oh,
and
cool.
Yeah, and then here Kari says, there we go. You're on point with the novel for Dracula. Many people only have their knowledge from movies, sadly, as it can be a hard book for some people to get through. Yeah. Jim, did you ever hear Orson Welles' Mercury Theater adaptation of Dracula?
No. Mm-mm.
It's cool. And also in his in the book that Bogdanovich wrote about Orson, I've both read the book and also, thankfully, back in the day, he put out his actual audio interviews with Orson as a book on tape. And oh man, like he was just fascinated. He's like, nobody has done the real story of Dracula. Everyone adapts the stage play from that the Lugosi even performance came from. And he said the same thing that you did. He goes, this is a much more terrifying story. He said there's a scene where there's a bag full of babies that Dracula created to drink or grabbed to drink the blood and everything. And that's one of the things I think that Jonathan sees in the manor and everything. Yeah, crazy shit, man. I love this. Among these preview pages, are we going to see an image of Dracula?
I don't know. Maybe. Yeah, I think so. I think they have one in there.
Okay, I'm going to keep going
up after the next two. I don't remember they cut it off.
Beautiful stuff, Jim. Seriously, I love looking at this stuff.
Thank you.
I know everyone is. Yeah, there's Dracula, right?
Yep.
Wow, interesting. And obviously ancient as well.
Yes.
Very interesting, Jim.
Yeah, so like in the story, the more he interacts with Harker, and when he decides to leave the castle and go to where Harker's from, the stuff that he's doing, he's getting younger and younger as he, does the stuff he does,
Drinks the blood and everything. He's becoming younger.
Yeah. But there's other parts, and that's also what adds to the transformational qualities to him. But there's other parts, like before he leaves the castle, when there's a scene where he's scurrying down the wall of the castle, and in the novel, Jonathan isn't quite sure what he sees because it reminds him of an insect, and that almost as if the cloak he has acts like giant insect wings, and his limbs are elongated and stuff. So it's like really like trippy stuff.
God, that's great, man. That's fantastic. Here, Stephen knows about the Wells adaptation. He has it on vinyl. You can find it as we're discussing, and it's certainly not right now, but if you want to look online, like the Internet Archive, you can absolutely find a version to play. And it really is impressive. I mean, Wells is, to me, and I'm not alone in this thought, but his best medium really was radio.
Yeah,
I've never seen a stage play of Wells, obviously, and it's likely that would have been amazing as well. But yeah, I really do appreciate Beyond War of the Worlds, which of course is the one that everybody knows. Right. But there's a lot of really good Mercury Theater adaptations that he did in that period. So Dracula is certainly one of them.
Yeah, putting that on vinyl would be amazing.
Dude, when I was a kid, I was such a sucker for old time radio, and thank God we had a couple nostalgia shops that would carry. I'm sure you remember, in the Warren books, or it was in the Warren books where they would advertise old radio shows, The Shadow and War of the Worlds and all that stuff. But thank God we actually had a local store here in Chicago that I could go and buy the vinyl. I had tons, both not only drama and horror and all that stuff, but even Jack Benny and some of the great radio comedies, and Gunsmoke. I had a couple albums of Gunsmoke episodes. Yeah, I love that stuff. Massive sucker for that crap.
Yeah, when I was a kid, we used to go camping in Northern California, near Lake Davis, and up there, this was way long time ago. I was a little kid. But at night, starting like at, I don't know, like 10 p.m. or something like that, there was this AM radio station that would play these old, like either horror tales or murder mystery radio plays. And so you would just be out there in the dark looking up at the stars, listening to these broadcasts on AM radio. I don't even know what the channel was, but I remember that. It was so cool,
Well, we're close to the same age. Another friend of mine remembers fondly the CBS Radio Mystery Theater that literally ran, at least in Chicago. I mean, some stations only ran it 5 nights a week. Illinois, or in Chicago, we ran it 7 nights a week. And it was the guy who created Inner Sanctum back in the 40s. And from like the early 70s to the early 80s, he would make new radio productions. And they're fantastic. And they were like, typical. They ran on the CBS news stations. So top of the hour, you'd have 10 minutes of news. And then you'd have like 50 minutes with commercials, a great radio play. And there, again, something else you can find in the Internet Archive. When every Halloween, I always put out a list around Halloween time of my favorite radio dramas. Donovan's Brain, which became The Brain That Wouldn't Die, that movie. The radio adaptation of that is fantastic. Another thing that Orson Welles starred in. It was for the show called Suspense. But yeah, good horror, good sci-fi. Yeah. I love that stuff. And again, theater of the mind. So I can appreciate you guys being out there enjoying the sounds.
Yeah, I have on vinyl the Orson Welles War of the Worlds, and I have some a few of the radio plays for Doctor Who, which are cool.
Love them.
Probably the oddest thing I have that's stories on vinyl is a Conan vinyl that is short stories or excerpts of short stories that are read by Sprague. I think that's how you say the last name. One of the authors that took over after Howard.
Wow.
And he's reading it himself, and he's the worst narrator. just the worst, but it's still kind of fun to listen to.
That's great. Jim, I had Jim Zub on last week talking about Conan. Is that have you done any covers, or would that be something that would interest you, doing any Conan stuff?
Oh, for sure. I've been approached to do some. I just haven't had time. But I would love to do something like that in the future. I think it'd be cool. Any of the Robert E. Howard stuff would be fun.
Being a boxing person myself, as I was telling Jim, I'm like, more Sailor Costigan, please.
Yes.
In fact, God bless Gary Gianni. I had an anthology book of non-Conan Howard short stories, and I showed it to him, and he's like, "Oh, I did the cover for that. Hold on a second." And he drew inside the book this wonderful remark of Sailor Costigan.
Oh, that's awesome.
And I'm like, Gary, that's beautiful, man. Yeah,
awesome.
I love it. Oh, yeah. All right, look, man. A lot of people were bringing up your greatest hits here. Hold on a second. Let me get some of the questions that people have. They want to know: would you? Here, John asks, would you ever return to Desolation Jones with Warren Ellis? But also, he's looking forward to the new edition.
At this point, I don't foresee something like that happening. Ellis and I have talked about, at least for now, treating the current new edition that's going to come out as a complete work. In some ways, I kind of enjoy that, because even though the story ends leaving you with some questions, I feel like that sort of what makes it work for me is that not everything is answered. You have a complete story there. You have everything you need to know. You just don't have everything that you can know. Um, which sometimes stories work better that way for me. Um, and Desolation Jones is definitely one of them. And when I talked to Ellis about that specifically, he agreed, and thought that was a good idea, that it stays as is. But who knows, down the road in the future, you never know. You never say never to anything, right? But because I do really like the character a lot.
Stephen Ernest brings up Promethea and says it was amazing, beautiful art, different styles. Yes, indeed. Yeah, you really, again, Jim, that and also in your design for Batwoman, I really felt, you really were stretching in the best ways. And do you like to challenge yourself that way? I mean, does it excite you more to draw?
Yeah, I like the challenges of seeing what is possible, even if it doesn't exactly work the way I would hope it would. I would prefer to try those things than not, and that probably is one of the reasons why my projects take a while to come out, because it's toying around with things. Echolands is a great example of that. When people see what Volume 2 looks like compared to Volume 1, I think they're going to be quite surprised at how some of the style shifts that takes place are rather shocking. But the flow will be super cool the way it unfolds.
Without spoiling, what can you tell us about the story of Volume 2?
So Volume 2 picks up right where Volume 1 left off, where the characters are in Horror Hill, and they went to Horror Hill to try to recruit basically the vampire community to join Hope's crusade to build an army against Taros Demond, the tyrannical wizard guy. But when they get there, as shown at the end of Volume 1, they get attacked by zombies. And zombies, they don't know. Rosa, the vampire that's with them, their companion, doesn't know what they are. So the fact that these things are in Horror Hill and the vampires don't know what they are, but it comes out how that kind of happened, and has a lot to do with something that her brother did, and her brother is the guy who usurped her throne, and why she left Horror Hill in the first place, ends up in San Francisco and becomes one of the many thieves in the group of companions that Hope hangs around with. So that takes place for the first half, and then they end up going to Fourth Rome, where the character that we introduced in Volume 1, Romulus, who's sort of like the Kirby Roman guy, they end up going to where he's from, and it's all crazy Kirby stuff. And that turns into, that's going to end up being like a super epic battle as they all get confronted by the villain, the main villain, and that will lead them to somewhere else in the Echolands. I think people are going to be quite, wait, what now? When we get to that moment. The other fun part is we follow Rabbit, the lost companion, more in Volume 2, as he's kind of darting around the Echolands trying to find where his companions are that he got lost from. And so we get to see other parts of the Echolands that way that the main cast doesn't get to see. So it's pretty diverse. There's a Western scene. There's
great.
There's a Mango World scene, stuff like that. Yeah, it's bonkers.
That's excellent, man. That's great. Mentioning Kirby, I always think of, like your stuff with Alan, which came out through ABC, and Batwoman, obviously, DC and everything. Have you ever done any Marvel work that I'm not aware of?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I did. I've done a bunch of covers. I did like Warlock covers when
good.
Adlard drew Warlock.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I did those. I did some Wolverine covers. I drew a Wolverine annual. I did some issues, some pages here and there on X-Men, and then I did an arc on X-Man. Yeah, kind of all over the place there. Was so little bits here and there. It doesn't resonate. A lot of people don't remember. I even did remember when they did those things they were called Millennial Visions that they did.
Describe it, and I bet I do remember, but keep going.
They did these one shots where each page was a different character and a different concept of what this creator might do with it. But they were, sort of like futuristic stories. So one of the ones I helped come up with was a robotic Captain America, who's is super cool, whose personality has actually been downloaded into it from files that captured Steve Rogers' mind. So Steve Rogers is sort of in there, but it's a machine.
I get it.
Yeah. And then there was one I did that involved the X-Men, where Wolverine was the villain, and actually this is crazy stuff, but trying to stop him, they literally drop a nuclear bomb on him, and it doesn't kill him. But he's become this radical.
Yeah, heal from that. Go on.
Yeah, he's become this radical, almost terrorist guy. Almost like what Magneto might do on behalf of the mutants, but now it's Wolverine in the future. Yeah. So those were fun. It was one-off things that'd be super fun to actually flesh them out at some point, but Marvel probably even forgets they exist.
Well, honestly, I was going to say I'm going to check on Marvel Unlimited and see if any of that stuff's there, because I got a big blind spot sometimes with Jim. I don't know when those were being made. Were they being made in the 2000s or before that?
Yeah, and I think in the 2000s. Yeah, because it was. I was working on Promethea at the time.
Wow.
They're just one-off illustrations along with here's the concept.
Okay.
Yeah. And they did I can't remember how many of those they produced, but there was at least 2 different volumes. Pretty fun. I also did a couple Hulk covers. I did a Hulk cover that was for one of the annuals. And a single issue. I did a set of connecting covers for Captain Marvel when Peter David was doing Captain Marvel.
Genis, yeah.
Yeah. So it's just been a long time. Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't. Shame on me, Jim. I didn't know that. And also, again, a lot of these you're describing as either one image or covers and things. But yeah, I wondered about interiors because for whatever reason, I mean, again, this obviously Promethea and stuff obviously fits so well, and then your radical designs on Batwoman were just so exciting and thrilling to see as well in that presentation. What inspired the Batwoman look that you came up with when making those stories with Greg Rucka and beyond? Obviously, you stayed on the book more than Greg did, didn't you?
Yeah. So the initial designs were actually by Alex Ross, but there were certain things that we wanted to change specifically. So I made changes to the way the mask is, so the mask looks more predatory, and actually looks like something that could actually act as protective gear on her head. So it had a rigidity to it. I made her. I gave her bracers that were actually where components could actually be part of that. And that the points could come off and be throwing weapons.
Sure.
I got rid of the high heels. That was just ridiculous that she had these high heel boots. I don't understand. So I gave her military style heeled boots, but then kind of treated the tops of them around just below the knee area, the tops of them almost like a cowboy boot shape to the top. just to kind of mix it up design wise and see what can come out of it. I remember there was discussion about, because I think the original design, she had red underneath the black of the cape. The interior was red. And I remember there was some discussion of wanting to change that, but that not on my part. I can't remember who was wanting to change that, because they were feeling like the red seemed kind of weird for a Bat character. But we came up with reasons for it to be red in discussions with Greg, connecting the colors of Batwoman in a metaphysical way, since the character herself came from a Jewish background. I thought of that maybe it would be a cool idea that some of her activity prescribes to like Kabbalistic mysticism, and so the colors of red and black actually represent a very specific realm in the Tree of Life, which is the realm that represents war. And so that's how we came up. There's actually a line in one of the issues where she says, "Oh, the colors of war. This is perfect." Kind of.
Wow.
Yeah. Since
Jim,
war on crime.
And honestly, Jim, I was thinking more too of your page design of for Batwoman and everything, and the way you compose pages and stuff. And you would just do these amazing. The panels would be within a larger bat symbol, things like that. So yeah, as far as designing the pages, what made you want to do them that way?
I don't know. It's something I've always dabbled with, even with, going back to Promethea and some of the Batman stuff, and Desolation Jones even toys with some of that stuff. The Seven Soldiers of Victory I did with Grant, toys with some of that stuff. It's just always something I've been interested in. And since comics are a visual form of storytelling, I kind of feel like it doesn't always have to be to convey information. It doesn't always have to be panel A, B, C, and so on.
Sure.
That the entire page could say something and have some sort of commentary on the events taking place, or represent a certain attitude, or create an emotional punch of some kind. And it's the same reason why I'm all over the place dabbling with different styles too. It's the same reasoning, to see what can be gained out of it, because it's a unique art form unto itself, and you can do those things. So why not?
Yeah. ChemDog says he really enjoyed Echolands, which is awesome. And let's see here. Also, John wanted to know, would you ever do anything new with Rucka, either Batwoman or a new project altogether?
It depends. I mean, I love what Greg can do. It's just a matter of timing, really. Echolands is going to take up so much of my time. I don't know. It's hard for me to think about a larger project outside of Echolands at this point. But when towards the tail end of Batwoman, when Greg was talking about moving on, we had actually talked about doing a graphic novel. I think it was a graphic novel. For the life of me, I can't remember what it was called, but it had to do with the color cobalt. And so that intrigued me, what I could do design-wise with that color. It was going to be kind of a science fiction thing. But it didn't go much further than a couple discussions, because he moved on, and I stayed on. So
here, Harvey Picar's Ghost chiming in, and I guess using his Ouija board. IJH Echolands is dope.
Thank
and
you.
The landscape, yeah, I agree with him. The landscape format is amazing. I'm surprised, Jim, that more comics don't take advantage of the widescreen approach, and certainly even in tablet today. You see it every now and then, but I really like that period of the early 2000s when it was like, oh, wait a minute, let me turn it this way, let me turn the book horizontal and appreciate it. The bigger space, the chance to do bigger drawings and stuff, and bigger images.
Yeah, I think It's certainly way more difficult. I'll tell you that, working, and mainly because the main reason why it's difficult is because comics have always been, for the most part, that portrait shape, right? The standard
Sure.
portrait shape. And so what makes it difficult is when you're working with that portrait shape for, so, like for me, I've been around for such a long time that moving into a different shape that goes this way versus this way. I've been working for so long as a professional in the industry that it's really hard to shake thinking in this shape and now going to this shape. And that presents huge challenges, not just visually, but in the way you have to write it, the way the dialogue fits, all that stuff. And so it's constantly having to be rethought on every page. So something that we, Hayden and myself write into a script, we kind of know, well, it has to work this way. But because the whole idea of, portrait shaped comics still lives in the back, when you're writing it, it might not work the way you kind of have written it. And so when I get to the drawing stage, I sometimes often have to change stuff from the way we wrote it to make it work for the format. And also because I like to play around with weird layouts and challenge myself, I'm always looking for ways, well, how do I make, just like I would do with the portrait shape, trying to invent new ideas for that. It's the same thing with this. So every spread is kind of like, well, I know what this information has to be, but how do I present it in a unique way, even for this format of being landscaped? So yeah, it's super fascinating, but I do like it to such a degree that last year I did, was it last year or the year before? Last year I did a couple projects that were back to portrait shaped panel by panel storytelling, but they were music oriented. So I did one for Blondie, and I did one for where me and my wife adapted one of their songs in the comics form, and then same for a band called Murder by Death. And I remember when I started to work on those, because they had to be the standard portrait size or shape. I mean, I remember thinking like, oh, why can't it be like this? Why can't it be a landscape? Because it would be so awesome, kind of like I've spoiled myself in some ways that, wanting it to be that way. And then I think the other reason why we don't see a lot of comics taking on that shape because of the challenges. I mean, you can of course figure them out. But I think because portrait shaped comics it's been decades and decades and decades of that, trying to convince publishers to do something unique is super hard, because you get some, not to knock retailers, but some retailers push back on when you do unusual formats and stuff like that. They want uniformity. And so publishers, I think, shy away from trying it. But that's what's so great about doing a book like Echolands at some place like Image, because they're like, whatever you want to do, let's try it.
That's great.
Yeah.
Absolutely. That's funny. All right, Jim, I hope this isn't a sore subject. I really don't remember the details of this, but Adrian was wondering if your version of Batwoman number 25, was it trashed, or is it sitting in a vault somewhere at DC? Is that when you left the book, Jim?
Yeah. So I'm fine talking about it.
Thank you.
It is a tough subject for me, because Hayden and I really believed in what we were doing. But no pages. We didn't get the opportunity to draw any pages, but we did write scripts. So we had, I think we had scripts written for issue 25 and partially of 26, or maybe all of 26, which were going to be a kind of a little 2-part mini arc. So the scripts exist, and we also have outlines for where we were going to take the series for the next year, and then looser, longer term outlines where we could take it up through it would at least issue 50 or 60 of content.
Wow.
Yeah. It was going to be crazy. So,
well, I'm sorry they didn't give you
well, it made it extra tough on those being forced out on at that point in the series. Those 2 issues that I was actually going to be drawing the bookends, and Sienkiewicz was going to draw the rest of the story.
Wow.
And the reason why we chose to do that, and Bill was all on board. I talked to him about what we wanted to do. It was all going to be taking place inside Alice's mind. So that would make sense for it to look completely different. Yeah.
Absolutely. That's a great idea. Man, I forgot about Alice. Tremendous character. Absolutely. Really, Kate's whole nuclear family. Great ideas. Really, I mean, truly, I hand it to you and Greg for the concept and what you guys did with it. And I'm sorry that you didn't get to follow through with your ideas beyond that. Here, Harvey Picar's Ghost says Batman or Batwoman 25, Swamp Thing 88 by Veitch should both be brought to life in a perfect world. Oh, there you go. That's a nice comment. And he also said that some people or some comic readers are turned off by landscape format. It's really weird to me because thanks to newspaper strips, it always seems natural to me. I hear you, man, and I agree. And truly, I appreciate that what you're doing with Echolands and what you did with Promethea and a lot of your other books in the past and stuff. It's like, no, let's break out of that, format. It's ingrained in all of us, and I get that. But yeah, it's like it's an art book. Let's experiment. Let's do. And again, that's why I really appreciate a lot of what you do.
Yeah, and I think Echolands, the format surprises people, but once I've not heard anybody who has read it, once they've read it, don't complain about the format, because they can, what we're doing inside of it, they can now see the potential of what that format can do. And honestly, the type of story that Echolands is, the landscape format really lends well to the feeling of it feeling epic, like this mythical, big mythic fiction epic storytelling. It really lends to that aspect. In terms of being able to tell that Batwoman story someday, interestingly, I got contacted by editorial at DC. It's been probably it's been a while now, wondering if I would be willing to come back and do it. And I had to explain to them, well, everything that we had, Hayden and I had planned, would take another 24 issues to really see it fully realized. And also, I told them that with the stuff that other people have done with the character since, I don't know how we could re-engage from our point of view and do it justice to where it would still align with what others have done. Because for me, I'm very much a continuity oriented person, and I wouldn't want to do anything where like, oh, those other stories you read, oh, they were just a dream, or anything dumb like that. I'd want to acknowledge what those other creators had done. So that would make it tough to kind of like, how do we integrate that into what we were originally planning? And then, like I said, it'd be 24 issues. It would. I don't have time for 24 issues. So.
Respect that. I totally understand. Also, it's a shame because as you describe it, it does sound intriguing, and again, your concerns about it not meshing where they have Kate right now is very interesting. Because it's like, well, then again, maybe someday, maybe in Elseworlds, maybe a Black Label, and again, as you said, if you need 24 issues. I can appreciate that as well. I don't know. I don't know how you accomplish it then. Stephen points out, and I certainly remember your last issue of Promethea, the pages could be taken out and laid out for the poster that was also available. I remember that very well. And again, the experimentation you and Alan did on Promethea was really thrilling to see. Really, really thrilling.
Yeah, that was interesting little nugget about issue 32. As crazy as that issue is and how it functions, and so experimental, is actually the fastest issue of Promethea that I did.
Wow.
It's so strange.
That's amazing. How was that collaboration with Alan? And how did you find working with Alan? Again, 32 issues. That's a long run.
Yeah. No, I loved working with Alan. I think what was great for me personally working with Alan was at that point in my career, when I got the Promethea gig, my career was on its way. I was doing some interesting things. Like I had done Chase, I had done Judge Dredd, I had done some random covers at Marvel. I had done Son of Superman with Howard Chaykin. So things were moving along well. But I think what made working with Alan such a lift up for me was his utter complete openness and trusting me to do what I do. And because of that, it allowed me to really push to see what was possible. And I also helped that, I was a big Alan Moore fan at the time, and knew that from reading his works, he'd be open to pushing things creatively to see where we could go. And so it was like the perfect venue to kind of find myself on and really fully realize the way I like to tell stories. And having a creator like Alan who likes to experiment, basically it was two guys who were like willing to jump off a cliff together. So, but because of that time, it gave me a lot of confidence into my own work outside of the context of Promethea, that I can work in comics and do comics the way I want to see them. Yeah. Versus somebody else. Yeah.
That's amazing. Well, and again, it's hard to think of another possible collaborator that Alan could have found that would convey those ideas of magic and mythology that you both were able to put out there with Promethea. Yeah, it was stunning. And again, it really, Jim, it was that period that got me back into comics. Because I always appreciated comics and traditional comics and stuff, but it was the experimentation that you guys were doing. It was the crime comics that Brubaker and Bendis and Rucka and a lot of them were doing. And I'm like, oh my God, look at all this interesting things that go beyond the traditional Superman or Wolverine or X-Men story. And it's like, Jesus, this is like, all right, they're taking chances, man. This is really cool. And just different genres and different ideas. It excited me. And I'm like, all right, I'm going to start going to the comic store every week again because of guys like you.
Yeah. And for me on Promethea, the other thing that helped build my confidence as a storyteller, even though at that point I had already co-created Chase and worked on the stories in Chase, developing that stuff. It was such a short-lived thing that I still wasn't. I had always seen myself as not just an artist, but a storyteller, and always wanted to find avenues to where I could bring those chops to things. So Chase helped me a lot in that regard, but getting to work with Alan on Promethea, that was another thing that helped my confidence as a storyteller was how often we would talk about things that the series would go. Like we would talk on the phone, and he's about to write, we'll just say some random issue 9. He's about to write issue 9. We would talk on the phone, and he'd want to know my thoughts on stuff and get my interpretations of various ideas, and how much of that stuff found its way into the final scripts was, helped boost my confidence that, I'm actually a decent idea guy, So yeah.
Clearly. Well, we all think so, man, but especially, like you said, based on Echolands. It's, no, again, that's great, Jim. And I'm really glad to hear that it gave you more confidence to, your plotting and your story ideas and stuff. That's really great to hear. All right. I'm looking at the comments and seeing if there's any, Adrian understands and says, continuity. And time, my two mortal enemies in comics. I hear you, man. Absolutely. Very, very funny. No, that's cool. Really, yeah, great, really interesting, man. Well, again, I think we're all excited for Echolands coming up, but right now, first and foremost, we got Dracula coming up in just a couple weeks. Again, here's the cover, everybody. Yeah, it's going to be cool, Jim. And I hope you have time that you can carve out that beyond this, like we said, maybe Frankenstein. Great. I would love to see your interpretation of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde.
Yes. Yeah. I literally at the comic store last week, I tend to go every week.
Okay.
And we were talking about, because this is going to be coming out soon, and the FOC is today. And so.
Oh, excuse me. Okay, great.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, and I was talking about, like, it'd be so cool if I had time to do a series of these books, but each one, takes roughly 4 to 5 months to do. And if I did it in the same style, like the simple prose passages with illustrations, painted illustrations, and getting all the design together and all that stuff, it takes about 4 or 5 months or so. And
okay.
With the schedule of Echolands, there's just no way I can really do it. So like the Dracula work it's older material, and it was rather easy for me to put together into this new format, and see what could be done. But we had talked about how fun it would be to have a series of books, and I started rattling off, like, how would I approach it? Like if we did the Invisible Man, or we did the Creature, or we did the Wolfman, or
sure,
Island of Dr. Moreau, or Jekyll and Hyde, like you said. And I was telling them, I'm like, if in an ideal world, if I was able to do that, I would wait to do Frankenstein, and that's the end cap book. So
hilarious, sure.
Dracula, the two biggest ones, right? That way you keep people anticipating, build that suspense.
That's great, man. Yeah, honestly, Jim, it's like your own version of Classic Illustrated back in the day.
Yeah.
With frankly, no disrespect to those artists, but frankly, with better art. I mean, it really, I think it lends itself to interesting. Well, like I said, the Flesk, 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. I'd love to see it.
J.H. Williams. Another great one. Yeah. Yeah. There's so, like, I could easily do one of those a year for the next 10 years, it'd be so much fun. Yeah.
Well, here's hoping that Dracula's enough of a success that if we don't get it every year, every couple of years, you'll find time in your schedule to do that. ChemDog also would love to see Phantom of the Opera that way. Absolutely. That's another great one. Harvey says every Frankenstein book is bound to be compared to Wrightson. The pressure. Right. Well, but also in fairness, and it's funny, I literally, an hour or so before we were talking, I saw Kelly Jones promote that his next volume of what he and Matt Wagner are doing with Dracula is coming up as well. I think there's plenty of room in the pool for everyone to dive in and do their thing. But it's fun to compare what they're doing with Dracula and what you're doing with Dracula. They're very different in I think in the most positive ways.
Yeah, I think so too. There's, I think, room for various interpretations. But I do understand what they're saying about how iconic Wrightson's take on Frankenstein is, and therefore I would never try to do anything. I wouldn't approach it in the same way at all. I wouldn't try to even work in that same territory. I would do it fully painted, just like the Dracula stuff. Especially if there's going to be a series of books, it'd be wise for them to have all a similar visual aesthetic, so it feels like a set, a collection. So I think, it'd be dumb of me to try to do a pen and ink version of Frankenstein, when Bernie Wrightson's pen and ink version of Frankenstein lives out there in the world, it'd be like, what? You know? Yeah. So the painted Frankenstein could be fun, you know.
By the way, Chemdog, great suggestion. And I am such a fan of this original movie. But again, Forbidden Planet would be
That's a favorite of mine as well.
Oh my God. And I got a good friend of mine who's a aspiring screenwriter. He's like, I got a great idea for Forbidden Planet 2. And I'm like, hey man, run with it. I mean, my God, it's still so iconic.
It is
like being a 50s movie and the trappings of 50s sci-fi. I mean, those guys really outdid themselves with the design and the ideas that they had. Oh my God.
Yeah. Another favorite of mine, old sci-fi stuff, is the original The Day the Earth Stood Still. Probably one of my all-time favorite movies, period. That's again, it's so iconic, but for different reasons than for Forbidden Planet, you know. But that's one that's super powerful for me. I'm curious how you would do a adaptation of into a painted book of Day the Earth Stood Still. That'd be interesting to try to think about.
Well, you know, I don't know how you felt, but honestly, I ignored the Tom Cruise remake. Or was it Keanu Reeves, excuse me.
Yeah.
Getting War of the Worlds and Day the Earth Stood Still mixed up.
Yeah.
But honestly, in both ways, I'm like, sorry, no, it really is. It was a product of its time.
Yes.
And you know, I don't know how you feel about it, but I'd really want to do that kind of retro boarding house and, you know, all those great character actors that are in it. And of course, Michael Rene. And I mean, you don't want to fuck with Nort. I mean, my God, not Nort. What's his name? The android, the robot.
Oh,
Gort?
Gort.
Okay. Yeah, Gort, of course, the dog Green Lantern. I'm getting, man, my brain must be scrambled, Jimmy. I apologize. All right, and yes, Chemdog with the infamous classic phrase, Klatal Bari Niktu. Indeed, Patricia Neal. Oh, good stuff, man.
And even, you know, like when you think about like how you mentioned how far how far advanced the special effects in Forbidden Planet are, when you think of the time that they were done, how revolutionary it was. But even though, and I feel the same way about The Day the Earth Stood Still, there's some things in there, even though it's way more subtle, the few parts that there is special effects, like when the ship first opens up, it lands and it opens up and you're like, wait, how did they do that? Because it looks like there's no seam for that, stuff like that.
Yeah.
You know, you're like, oh, you know, and it just adds to it being even more convincing.
I was so happy to see in the first episode of Star Trek Strange New Worlds that Captain Pike in his home was watching The Day the Earth Stood Still. And it's like, oh, that's great, man. And I always felt Forbidden Planet, and I know I'm not alone in this. It's like, you know, when Roddenberry created Star Trek, that's what he was thinking of, because it really is like the grandfather of Star Trek in terms of, I mean, because it's the same plotting, and Leslie Nielsen's character easily could have been a Starfleet captain. It really feels like a Star Trek episode, in my opinion.
Yeah, and you know, this is geeky on my part, but
no, don't do that, Jim. God forbid, you're in the wrong place to do that.
You know, I think about some of the effects that they pulled off in a lot of those old movies, like the original Invisible Man, when the scene when he they have the wrappings off of him and he's laying in the bed and he starts to you know, disappear or appear, and you can see the veins and stuff, you know, and I'm like, how did you do that back then? It's so fascinating, that kind of thing.
Or was it was Jekyll and Hyde, and was it Jekyll and Hyde? Where they had a different light filter, and you could kind of see a transformation that way. I so agree with you, Jim, and truly, those early filmmakers and what they were able to do with the limited special effects are astounding. I mean, my God, of course, Willis Cooper and King Kong, and that, it's so funny. And I've heard other people. I think Bob Burns himself, who owns. I hope Bob Burns is still with us, but he owned the actual King Kong doll, or the model, and how they would, you know, they with stop motion. That's how they move Kong and everything. But when they would put their thumbs on the actual figure to move an arm or move a leg, the fur would ruffle because obviously they've picked it up and touched it. So just using the stop motion, it's like it really looked like Kong was moving.
Yeah,
I mean, it's again, it's funny, and I don't know if you feel this way, but it's like CGI on the one hand is ridiculously realistic, but it takes away the heart of a lot of special effects as opposed to the practical effects.
Yeah, it certainly can. And, even when it comes down to, CGI characters versus animatronic characters or CGI stuff done to create a character over a person, it's not quite the same as like when you look at, say, the original Nosferatu, right? Max Schreck, that makeup, I mean, holy crap. It's like, it's brilliant. And to think that they were pulling that off back then, it's so fascinating to me how inventive they were. Yeah.
I'm with you, man. No, I'm absolutely with you. That's great, Jim. You mentioned Doctor Who earlier, and I'm really glad you like those audios. I'm the same way, man. I'm so happy because it's really extended the careers of so many of our favorite doctors, and just doing audio. It's been wonderful having and really the writing has been, I think quite good and worthy of Doctor Who universe kind of stories and stuff. Are you up to date with Doctor Who? Have you been watching Ncuti Gatwa?
We watched the most recent one that is on Disney Plus now.
Yeah.
We went through that whole season, and it was good. There's some parts that bugged me, but it's gonna be that way with any show,
Sure.
But I there's a lot of stuff that I really, really liked that they did. And it's fascinating to me how the new version of Doctor Who, that they're writing him to be more emotional, which is fascinating. Before there was sort of like you would get hints of emotion, but not as forward as this one was. And then the other thing I liked is how many episodes of the new one were pretty inventive and weird, like just the weirdest ideas, like the episode with all the babies, but they have adult minds. I mean, like some of the stuff they come up with for the new season was super cool, and then there was other parts that were surprisingly actually really scary. So like when I think they called them goblins, but when the goblins would come and they would take infants from the cribs, I mean, the way they played that was pretty scary. It was cool. Yeah.
Who's your favorite doctor?
Oh, I don't know if I could choose one, because I don't think I could choose one because each one has interesting things about them. I did enjoy, like everyone loves David Tennant. Is for most people that's their favorite.
Yes, in the modern.
A lot of people love David Tennant. I thought his doctor was super great, but I actually liked his companion more.
Which one? Several.
Rose,
Martha.
Why can't I think of her name now? The redhead.
Well, that's Matt Smith's companion, right? She married Rory, and shame on me, I'm forgetting her name. She's in
the other redhead.
The other redhead?
She had to wipe her memory of him.
Oh, of course, yeah, Donna.
Donna, that's it.
Donna Noble, of course. Yeah, shame on me. I didn't think she had red hair, but yeah, I like Donna Noble a lot. Oh, yeah. My God, and before he wipes her head, she's like, but we're supposed to be mates. We're supposed to be together. It's like, oh man, I know.
Yeah, so good. But when they switched from David Tennant to Matt Smith, I liked the Matt Smith version a lot because he was really good at showing kind of like there's this inner darkness in there, and it would creep out without him actually saying it, but the way he performed it, and it gave a kind of a different edge to the character. But then I also love when Peter Capaldi took his place, the discussions around what makes the Doctor now that he's this old guy, and the commentary that they brought to that was so fascinating about, you know, how is he going to be different? How, in what way is he affected now? Are people going to look at him differently now he's this older actor and stuff?
Absolutely.
And they worked that into the story and into his character. It was so well crafted.
I'm so with you, man. And I mean, for classic Doctor Who, I do love Tom Baker, but Pertwee really charmed me. And I saw him after I had seen Baker, because in America we obviously got the Baker ones first. But I really appreciated Pertwee, and I hear what you're saying, and I agree. And I mean, I love Peter Capaldi. Always did. One of my favorite character actors. Yeah. Going back to when he was a kid and making those Bill Forsyth movies like Local Hero and things that. So I was really excited. But I do get it, because Tennant was a young Doctor, and then Matt was even more of a younger Doctor. And I mean, you saw a lot of these young fans are like, man, the new Doctor's going to be old. I don't know if I'm going to like that. Not realizing the lineage going back 50 plus years, you know.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, and then they upped the ante on how dark he could be with the Peter Capaldi version. And of course, moving on from that to Jodie Whittaker, she did a fantastic job as the Doctor. I do feel like some of the writing on her stuff, it was a little hyperactive.
Yeah. Well, yeah, man. I honestly, I was excited and like, this will be great. And she really, both as an actor and her character moments were like, okay, this might be fun. I really felt like, and no disrespect to Chris Chibnall, and I know he's got a lot of detractors, I really felt the writing let her down, and we never really, and there are also too many companions. God, and they would all spread out and do their own thing, and it's like, well, it's only an hour, kids, and if we're with Yaz or with the grandfather or whomever, it's like, that doesn't leave a lot of time for the Doctor to be the Doctor. And even when there were 3 companions to Peter Davidson, they always seemed to be together. And you know, so it wasn't as intrusive as I think the modern stories got. So yeah, I kind of felt Jodie, unfortunately. I hope she does audios, and much like the guy who got redeemed was Colin Baker, and I'm so happy for him, because those were tough to watch. And my God, a lot of his audios are, I mean, they did one with him and Davros, and it was so great. And it's like, oh man, what a shame, because really they both got under each other's skin. I also appreciate what you said about like how dark Matt's Doctor became. I felt in the 50th anniversary episode, it's like, you know, he's holding back of things that happened between his time and Tennant's time. And it's like, well, I want to know. And Matt's like, no, you really don't want to know what I went through. And it's like, that's great, man. I mean, that's the thing. On the one hand, a lot of the writing really did get better and more interesting. Yeah. And then, like I said, unfortunately, I think Chibnall and company, I don't know. I don't know what happened, but yeah, I felt kind of let down. And I'm hoping Gatway has a stronger second season, because I'm with you, man. There were a lot of things I liked about the first season. There were a lot of things I didn't like about the first season.
Yeah. From a writing standpoint, I feel like the new version of Doctor Who, it was smart to bring Russell T Davies back as the showrunner, and because his sense of weird is what really sings for a lot of that stuff on the new season.
Agreed.
But in terms of Matt Smith being a favorite of ours, I think a lot of that also has to do with not just his performance, but how smart the writing got. Because the writers all of a sudden, like, we're dealing with a time traveler. Let's mess with storytelling because of time, right? And that kind of carried through a little bit onto the Peter Capaldi stuff. Like that one episode where you find out he's doing such and such, but he had to do such and such in a way to where he was buried for 100 years or 1,000 years or something like that. And I'm like, wait a second. So the entire time he's buried, there's other doctors running around, and he's buried back in time, that kind of stuff. I love when they mess with use time as a storytelling device when you're dealing with a time traveler. I think it was super smart to do that.
Couldn't agree more, man.
The Matt Smith stuff. So they got really clever things where you're like, you didn't realize such and such until they revealed it because of the time travel stuff. And you're like, oh, that's so smart.
No, it was great stuff. No, well, I appreciate this nerd moment about Doctor Who. Are you a Star Trek guy at all? I'm not saying that we'll continue, but are you? All right. When we talk about Echolands Volume 2 and it's ready, or whenever you want to come back, much like we just carved out time for Doctor Who, let's carve out some time for Star Trek, because
anytime.
As word balloon fans know, it's like, don't get John started on Star Trek. True, Jim. I'm like grandma with her soap opera. These are my stories. I've been watching that show since I was 5 years old, and I've got very strong opinions about Star Trek. And good Lord, I was even watching a bit of a Next Generation rerun before we talked tonight and everything. So I never tire of watching and talking about Star Trek, sadly.
Yeah, we did during the pandemic. We did a thing where we went all the way back to the beginning and watched the episode every day, working all the way up to the present day stuff. It was super fun to watch it that way. Yeah.
I'm with you. Oh, hey, and God, now Ken Dog's asking if I've read the IDW Next Generation comic. Of course I have. God, Jim, would you ever want to do any Star Trek stuff for IDW?
Oh, that would be super interesting. I haven't thought about it. It'd be super interesting to do. I've read some of the various comics, not deep dive like was on the TV shows, but I've read. I have a collection of some of them.
I'll say briefly. Colin Kelly and Jackson Lanzig are doing the main IDW book, and then Chris Cantwell is doing a Worf Defiant book where he's captain of the Defiant. And wow. They're both incredible, and these guys love Star Trek. And even when Mike Johnson was writing about the Kelvin universe stories of Chris Pine and Zachary Quinto and that crew, the comics were superior to the movies, dare I say it. And really Cantwell and Lanzig and Kelly really understand this property really well. And also Guggenheim did a great Star Trek The Motion Picture, the first movie era miniseries that I thought was great. That's they're hiring the right people that clearly love the franchise and are doing it justice in comic form. And it's a pleasure to read these comics every month, I have to say.
Cool. I'll have to check those out.
There you go, man. Well, Jim, I'm sorry we didn't talk earlier than today being the final order.
That's right.
But coming. What's the date that this Dracula thing drops? I know it's October.
Oh, that's a good question.
All right, don't sweat it. Here, I'll even look on your sneak peek and see if they've got it listed.
Might be
on the image page.
First week of October, maybe?
Yeah, it just says October, but that's okay. All right, keep as they say, look to the skies, everybody. Go to your local comic shop and find out.
Yeah, originally we were saying have it come out in October, but then the Image promotional staff was saying, no, let's have it come out at the end of September, so it'll be racked for all the stuff for October. But then the latest I heard is that it's now in October. But I don't know if that has something to do with issues involving the printing process or what. So I know some publishers have been having more difficulty with some printing services. So
I can appreciate that. Well, regardless, expect it in just a couple of weeks when we get into October. And no, Jim, truly, it looks amazing. Fantastic illustrated adaptation of the Dracula story, written by and drawn, of course, by J.H. Williams. It's going to be great. And as I say, I certainly hope it's the beginning of a monster book trend.
Awesome.
But regardless, again, Volume 2 of Echolands sooner than later. So that should be the basis of our next conversation when we get together. Jim, great talking to you, man.
Yeah, same
Fantastic
here.
conversation. Truly, man. Well, it's a two-person effort, and you're holding up your end. You're exceeding my bullshit. So yeah. So I thank you for that. I've had a very good day. I had a very good conversation with Mark Miller earlier today, and I only mentioned it. If people missed it, I want to let people know that just pop in when it's live. You might want to check that out. It happened in the early afternoon of Monday. So if you missed that on the feed, you should go back and check that out. But I'm glad everybody was here for this wonderful conversation with J.H. Williams III. As always, Jim, truly, man, beautiful work, and you blow us away with every project, and we're looking forward to what's coming up next.
Thanks, and thanks for all the kind words. It really means a lot. It's, sitting in the studio every day, you never know how people are going to respond to stuff, and so it's gratifying to hear that people are finding enjoyment in it, and that you're finding enjoyment in it. So it helps make the work more worthwhile. Yeah,
your message in a bottle of your work is reaching the mainland. Don't worry. Okay. We're finding it, and we're excited for it, man. No, congratulations, and as always, thanks for talking today. Thanks everybody for watching. Tomorrow, Terry Dodson and Pornsack Pishat Show are going to be talking about their new image book, and I can't wait to talk to them. That'll be a lot of fun. I hope you'll join us tomorrow night around this time as well. Until then, everybody stay safe, stay happy, stay healthy.